FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And welcome. You are listening to, and perhaps even watching, the Financial Survival Network. And I'm Kerry Lutz. Today's 10/6/20. Special guest on. Figured with all the turmoil going on, everything else, the madness, let's try to get some sanity, shine a light of sanity on the topic. And hey, what's your feelings? Where are we heading? Are you going to be a winner in this crisis or a loser? I'd like to know. Email me, kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, our good friend Danielle DiMartino Booth is with us. You know her well. Her book, which I read, was Fed Up, an insider's take on why the Federal Reserve is bad for America. Danielle, that came out in 2017. In your experience is vast, working at the Dallas Fed, full-time columnist for Bloomberg View. Happen to have met the good mayor a couple of times in my life. He was an interesting character, to say the least. But your 9 years in the Federal Reserve, I think, gives you a unique perspective as opposed to most might hear from who are really Fed observers. You were in the belly of the beast, literally. So first, you just told me this, and I think we'd be remiss in not addressing it. The president, who evidently is still in command, Alexander Haig, has not come back and said, I'm in command, everything's okay. But he said that no stimulus, it's over, and on to the next chapter of insanity.
He said at least until after the election. That was the body of the tweet, from what I understand. So markets turned on a dime. The Dow had been up 150 points, and it flipped and turned very negative, very red. Yeah.
So there's 2 possibilities, actually. There's probably more, but one possibility is that he's fed up and he's just not going to deal with it, and he'll do executive orders, whatever he's got to do. There's really no time left for anybody in Congress to sue him and stop him. And the odds of being able to do it, any event, are slim. Or he's bluffing and calling the bluff and perhaps scaring the people in Congress, whether it's Pelosi or Mitch McConnell, just saying, all right, you're not going to play game? I don't care. Pick up my marbles, because it is kind of classic Trump to do something like that.
It is. And in theory, if it's the Republicans in the Senate who are saying, we've got a 7.9% unemployment rate, it looks like the recovery's on track, at least on paper. We know that it's a K-shaped economy, but we don't care, because our constituents are the upper part of the K who are benefiting from the rising stock market. If theoretically it was the Republicans not playing ball, then Trump could say, well, let me show you what I can do to the stock market. So there's any multitude of explanations, and we're going to have to wait and see. What we do know, however, is that all we need to do is see if the wind has changed direction, because the next tweet could change the entire dialogue.
Yeah, well, I used to think, when I looked at songs, famous songs, 10, 15 lines by the Beatles, and it's worth $1 billion. And, there was nothing more ephemeral. Now there are tweets, and they can be worth hundreds of billions of dollars without a second thought. So,
right.
So I don't know. It seems like more the art of the deal to me. But
well, everything he does is calculated. If he didn't want for it to affect the market, or if he wanted to have time for the markets to work through it, or massage the narrative, he could have waited another hour until the markets closed. He chose not to. So you are right. It is always calculated.
Yeah, you can agree or disagree with his policies, his language, his whole personality. But the one thing is, I don't think that the guy acts rashly. He might say things rashly, might say things off the cuff that can have bad results or negative results. But when he actually does a policy, I do believe that it's thought out to some extent.
I would have to agree with you there. There's, I'll go back to the word I used before, and that is calculating. What's ironic is that it was done on the same exact day that Jay Powell gave a speech and said that we needed more stimulus desperately, and that he promised if it was too much stimulus, that there wouldn't be anything wasted, which I take you back to the title of the book. I'm even, why the Federal Reserve is worse for America every single day.
Yeah. So, look, I mean, obviously, our current global economic system is barely hanging on by a thread. Every day, I think its credibility and confidence, right? All economic systems, all currencies, all rely upon confidence. Confidence has definitely taken a major blow during the pandemic and the resulting global collapse. And what's the state of the economic system now, Danielle?
Well, look, I think what people need to distinguish is the fact that there was so much debt that had been built up in the prior decade, prior to the shock of the coronavirus, that all this massive shock did is kind of expose the folly of putting all of our confidence in central bankers who are one-trick ponies and only know how to build up the leverage in the system such that if there is a shock, everything goes to hell in a handbasket, and you wake up one day and you read that the IMF is bailing out 74 countries. So, there are ramifications for building up debt, even though there are a lot of constituencies out there who would prefer to think that there is such a thing as a free lunch. I think that the red swan of the coronavirus, the black swan of the coronavirus, whatever color you want to call it, has revealed that there is no such thing as free lunch.
Yeah, it's so true. And when you look around, supposedly there is a dollar shortage. Now, I understand the concept of it, but it seems to me that there's more dollars floating around than ever before, and yet nobody can lay their hands on them.
Well, there is something to be said for the scarcity of something that is seen or perceived as holding value, especially if you're in one of those 74 countries that I just mentioned. And they're not going to sit down and debate you about fiat currency and dollar versus gold versus Bitcoin. They're going to get their crashing currencies and their hyperinflating currencies, economies into dollars as quickly as they can. And that's just old world versus new world, but it's that kind of a dynamic that we're seeing play out in microcosms, but it adds up to something.
Yeah, it's just kind of counterintuitive when you see they just print out the stimulus, everything, add another 6 trillion to the deficit, don't even think about it. And then there's a shortage, but I see your point.
Well, think about how many of the treasuries the Fed itself is buying and holding on its balance sheet. So in some ways, dollars are scarce because the Federal Reserve actually needs those treasuries to buy, because the liquidity that's created doesn't filter through to the people they're supposed to be helping and safeguarding. It filters back through to the S&P 500. And that is by design.
Yeah. And for the first time, we saw helicopter money, PPP, EIDL, and $1,200 checks. I mean, there's a lot of people that have been counting on that second $1,200 check. Or in the case of my partner, he's got a bunch of kids. He got $5,500. There's people counting on that, and now they're pulling the rug out from under them. It's going to be a lot of unhappy people here.
There is going to be more unrest. There's no doubt about it. And, the shame here is that when you think about how little money it takes to put somebody into a vocational training program, to put somebody into a 2-year degree program of some kind that can teach them computer skills, to build don't forget build. This is not the FDR era. Our infrastructure is falling down around us. But, you're around Manhattan. You've seen the size of those potholes. To repair the streets, to repair the tunnels, to repair the bridges, which, by the way, creates jobs. And here we have our politicians just throwing money at people, making them dependent upon the state, and then wondering why they're upset when they pull the plug, as you say.
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense. So here's the thing. Are we heading for a global currency, whether it's crypto or whatever? It's kind of irrelevant, and a global government? Or is the reaction that's happening in the US and around the globe, where seemingly nationalism and rejection of globalism seems to be the flavor du jour.
Well, I think that there is something very romantic about talking about kind of a quick move to a global cryptocurrency. The problem is the world's financial system won't get on board. And that is how money moves around the globe. And as far as they're concerned, until China can unseat the dollar, they're going to transact in dollars. So it's not that there's not a rational reflection of the disgust in a lack of soundness in monetary policymaking. Of course there is. And I own plenty of gold for that matter. But the idea that there is a feasibility of a global cryptocurrency is, I'm afraid to say, somewhat naive. Because if you go back to the Roman era and go forth in time after that, it typically involves one nation, losing their reign over the reserve currency status and another one gaining it in turn.
And I couldn't agree with you more, because the dollar isn't just the dollar. It's a system, a platform, if you will,
right,
for storing ever diminishing amounts of value, but it's still a system that somewhat works. And look, if you're a money manager in the UK or in Germany, are you going to put your money in a Chinese bank over the weekend, or even a European bank? You're going to avoid it. You're going to put it in Deutsche Bank, or are you going to put it in JP Morgan Chase? Makes the decision really easy, and people can talk about the demise of the dollar and everything else. I've never really bought into it, although long-term, probably it's a likelihood, because all currencies eventually, fiat currencies eventually realize their intrinsic value.
They do. And we have to bear in mind that one of the reasons the US has been as dominant as it has as the reserve currency holder is that for generation after generation after generation, we maintained our sovereignty and our dominance in the global realm because we had the best education system. I'm talking about a few generations back. We had the innovation. We were at the cusp of the latest manufacturing trends. And we know that we're no longer there anymore. We know that what we have are several gigantic data companies that have a lot of value because they know the value of that data and they know how to wield power with it. But if you're talking about the next generation of artificial intelligence or quantum computing or semiconductors or any of those industries, you have to go to China to find the global leaders. And that, I think, is a gigantic wake-up call for the leadership of the United States for there to be a shift back, a focus back. I mean, we've got to get something out of the corona crisis, don't we? Maybe it should be a wake-up call that's like, hey, if we don't pay attention to what our enemies are trying to do, then we're eventually going to lose the dollar status. It won't happen overnight. It might not happen in 5 years, but it's coming.
Coming right now. I don't think many people in the world realize how much harm Trump has inflicted upon the Chinese system there.
Well, but I tell you what, there are two ways to look at what you just said. I don't know, if you look at Gallup polls, and Gallup has no bias either way, not liberal, not conservative, but if you look at Gallup polling, Americans have never been as aware of the threat of China as they are today. And I would argue that that's a great thing. And I give credit to Trump for putting China in the spotlight. But it's not soybeans, it's semiconductors. And so the focus and the thrust of his policies have gone in an inefficient direction, whereas we should have been hyper-focused on what they're focused on, which is the next generation of technology. That's where we should have been from day one.
Agreed. But the war's been going on. We just kind of engaged. And as America, when we join wars kind of midway or realize that we're in a war that we've been in for a generation but haven't figured it out, the response is always messed up. So in every crisis, I like to say there are winners and there are losers. This one, certainly we see Wall Street being a winner, but how do you, whether you're Joe Sixpack or Chris Chardonnay, how do you win from this? Because in the end, the world's going to do what it's going to do, but want the best for yourself, your family, your children, and your community. So what's our game plan here, Danielle?
Well, look, here's a big shout out to all the small businesses that are still alive in my little community, because I have made, and my family, we've all made a conscious effort to support them. And I think that that you should dismiss the idea that we no longer need small businesses in America, because that's saying like that we no longer need innovation. If you broaden it out, though, I think a lot of companies in America today, and I'm not talking about the super concentrated tech monsters, but go a rung underneath them. The ones that are going to survive, the ones that are going to come out of this lean and mean, are going to have some serious survivorship bias. And whether it's the S&P 50 or the S&P 500, excuse me, the S&P 100, there's going to be a very lean, mean, clean balance sheet cohort of great companies to invest in when we get to the other end of this. And as far as what's coming tomorrow, I've been a seed investor for several generations of people who I know run businesses really well. I know as a mother of 4 that it's going to take a lot for me to be with regularity back in a doctor's waiting room again, now that I know telemedicine is a thing. So, and I think that there's been a lot of growth that has been put into hyperdrive. Think of Zoom that we're on right now as just being the first generation. God knows what's going to follow it, but there are going to be people behind the next wave of innovation in this country, and you're going to be able to make money with them and from them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. When you go to a restaurant now, restaurants that never had takeout, that never had delivery, that barely had computers, now all the wait staff has portable terminals to plug in. You know, you can pay without ever reaching into your pocket, just scanning the barcode, and also just the ability to order in and curbside pickup. And maybe that's not like a huge thing, a huge benefit in your life, but it's a big deal.
I mean, it is. And think of all the money that's going to be spent on printing menus, not printing menus in the future. Now that you just walk in, scan it, and you've got it on your phone. So no, there will be winners who come out of this without a doubt. So
one apparent winner for the future is a company by the name of Tesla. Now let's not talk stock valuations, because we know there's a difference between the stock and the actual underlying company.
Right.
But they appear to be poised to become a major winner, and most of the legacy auto manufacturers appear that they're just not going to be able to keep up.
You know, it's interesting because now there is a money grab to try and find competitors of Tesla that can be acquired, because there hasn't been sufficient investment inside these big 3 out of Detroit automobile manufacturers. So I don't think that we're going to lose all of them per se, but there might be some very large consolidation in our future. And you look to Germany, which is even a bigger manufacturing juggernaut than the United States, that relies to an even greater extent on its automobile industry. You just had Continental Resources, the biggest auto parts maker in the world, lay off 30,000 people. But you're also seeing, by the way, the Chinese move in and partner up and provide German companies with some of that innovation and some of that technology so that they can turn the corner and become competitive in the electric vehicle space.
Yeah, it's a difficult space. I've always been a car person. I've been watching this evolution with particular interest. Initially, I just thought Tesla was going to be a niche manufacturer. Then they came out with the Model 3, and then I realized they're for real. And now when their cars are deconstructed, reverse engineered, the people who are doing it, a lot of the parts they don't even recognize, and they see that there are materials that are in use that you could never do in a big auto company, because it would take you 10 years to get them to change their ways. And yet Tesla says, oh, we don't like the way those welds are coming out. Got to use a different material. It's time to change. And, they've really kind of led the way here. And, their quality, their aesthetic quality perhaps leaves a bit to be desired right now because they are a technology company and it's complicated to get all those seams to match up properly. But in terms of their technology, according to this guy, Sandy Munro, who's like of car design, they're 5 to 10 years ahead of any competitor in the world. And it's the death knell. What about the oil companies who are, 100 billion gallons, 120 billion gallons here of gasoline? I mean, it's going to take time for this transition, obviously, but what's coming here, right?
Well, and the thing with the energy industry is that we knew what was coming in 2018 and 2019. We knew that there was too much private equity money that had poured into a sector that was not going to be able to be competitive in the future. So we knew that there were bankruptcies. It's just the coronavirus expedited that process. And now you're seeing the much needed consolidation, but you're also seeing something that you never saw when oil prices crashed and triggered the 2015-16 industrial recession that was worldwide. You're seeing the big majors like ExxonMobil fire people. And they never had to do layoffs. As bad as it got when oil got down to whatever it was, 20 something a barrel in 2000, after it started to decline in 2014, you never saw them have to push through with layoffs. And yet they are now, and they're right sizing, and there will be a different industry than what we are seeing today in a decade's time. And it's not that there'll be peak oil per se, it's that there will be other technologies that have slowly displaced.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to watch here, and I guess it's still unfolding. Going back a year ago, we had that repo crisis. Remember if I talked to you around then or not? But to me, that was the clue. That was the signal. Whether it was COVID or whatever, something was going to come and pop the bubble. And really, we probably had a couple of banks or major banks or hedge funds that were, by all accounts, insolvent, and that's what led to the repo crisis. And really, what have we learned from that? Probably not much. We just blame it on COVID.
That is the problem with brushing things under the carpet. People don't realize that they think that the world changed on March the 23rd when Jay Powell got out the bazooka and he saved the bond market, but they forget that in January that several massive hedge funds blew up to kingdom come and that the Fed had to intervene in order to save them. There was serious disruption in the markets that was readily apparent to anybody who was not willfully blind to them.
Yeah, the signals were all there. I knew it was coming. I knew in September. I said, how they're going to avoid this thing, I can't imagine, because there's nothing more stable, more staid than the repo market. I mean, it's the D team and all these banks that are at the repo desk. If they even have anybody there anymore, it's not all automated. So here we are, and well, I guess we're going to find out what's coming next. Hey, Danielle, where do we find you on the web these days? How do we connect with you?
Well, quillintelligence.com. Come see me. We publish daily. We publish weekly. And please follow me on Twitter at DiMartino Booth.
All right. Hey, really appreciate you coming on. Been an absolute pleasure as always. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.